defending free markets and making the moral case for capitalism. The Justin Mohr Show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the show. This is Justin Mohr. Thanks for being with me today. Today I want to specifically address and talk about the minimum wage. On a previous podcast, I have mentioned the minimum wage. It's actually, the title of that one is The Unintended Consequences of Big Government. That's one of the first ones I did, and that's before I got my new microphone that I use now. So the quality isn't as great on it, and there's a little bit of static in it. So I'm going to really dig deep into the minimum wage, and I'm going to tell you why I think it's a horrible idea. And so I'm actually going to start this episode by playing a clip of President Obama. And then I'm just going to attack the heck out of this thing. And I'm going to show you why President Obama is wrong about what he's saying and why his logic is non-existent. And so let me play you this clip of President Obama. This is from his State of the Union address in 2014. So just at the beginning of this year. Let's play it.
Americans understand that some people will earn more money than others, and we don't resent those who, by virtue of their efforts, achieve incredible success. That's what America's all about. But Americans overwhelmingly agree that no one who works full-time should ever have to raise a family in poverty. In the years since I asked this Congress to raise the minimum wage, 5 states have passed laws to raise theirs. Many businesses have done it on their own. Nick Shute is here today with his boss, John Serrano. John's an owner of Punch Pizza in Minneapolis. And Nick helps make the dough. Only now he makes more of it. John just gave his employees a raise to $10 an hour, and that's a decision that has eased their financial stress and boosted their morale. Tonight, I ask more of America's business leaders to follow John's lead. Do what you can to raise your employees' wages. To every mayor, governor, state legislator in America, I say, you don't have to wait for Congress to act. Americans will support you if you take this on. And as a chief executive, I intend to lead by example. Profitable corporations like Costco see higher wages as the smart way to boost productivity and reduce turnover. We should too. In the coming weeks, I will issue an executive order requiring federal contractors to pay their federally funded employees a fair wage of at least $10.10 an hour, because if you cook our troops' meals or wash their dishes, you should not have to live in poverty. Of course, to reach millions more, Congress does need to get on board. Today, the federal minimum wage is worth about 20% less than it was when Ronald Reagan first stood here. And Tom Harkin and George Miller have a bill to fix that by lifting the minimum wage to $10.10. It's easy to remember, 10.10. This will help families. It'll give businesses customers with more money to spend. It does not involve any new bureaucratic program. So join the rest of the country. Say yes. Give America a raise.
Okay, so President Obama, he says no one who works full-time should live in poverty. And so here he thinks that the government can step in and they can make it so people won't live in poverty. Government can cure this problem. After all of the government spending, we still have poverty after raising the minimum wage. And actually, it's funny, we didn't have a minimum wage until 1938. That was the very first year in our nation's history we've ever had a minimum wage. Guess how much the minimum wage was? It was 25 cents an hour. And now it's slowly going up. And now President Obama wants to raise it to $10.10 an hour. And then he mentions in this clip Costco, how they have high wages and that they're highly profitable and that they have less turnover because of it. And look at what Costco's doing. And just kind of pointing it out. And it's so funny he's bringing up this argument because for me, I'm against the minimum wage. And this is actually an example I would bring up. And Obama's doing it for me. He's going against his own cause because Costco having wages higher than the minimum wage already shows that the minimum wage is worthless and that no government action is necessary. Greedy businesses will voluntarily have wages higher than the minimum wage because, like Obama said, yeah, he was right that Costco, they have really high wages, great benefits, you don't work holidays. And look at the value it adds to Costco. They have less turnover. There's a huge value in that. When a business is always training new people, that costs a lot of money to do that. Then you're always interviewing, you're searching, you're putting posts on job sites, you're doing all this stuff, and it costs a lot of money. And like with Costco, they have these high wages. I mean, look at the employees who work there. They're happy. You have high employee morale. And it's beneficial to the business. When you have employees with a high morale, they're more likely to work harder, be more productive. When you have employees that are more productive, that can lead to a higher profit business. And Costco has a very good business model. Let me give you an example of a business that does the exact opposite of Costco. For example, there's a Hardee's I go to. It's at the nearby town here in Montana. And I swear, every time I go there, there is someone new taking orders at the counter. And here's me, I'll get like a number 4, no onions. And they never know how to do the no onions. They got to go call in the manager. Hey, how do you do this? They're trying to figure this stuff out. Every single time, I have the same problem. I just want no onions. And Hardee's, they pay a low wage. They probably pay the minimum wage there. They have a high turnover. Maybe the hours suck. I don't know what it is, but people just seem to vanish. They don't last very long, and they just keep cycling new ones in. And me as the customer, I have to pay for that too, because I have to deal with the incompetence of the staff. And so, but with Hardee's, it's a cheaper food, and they can't afford to pay those high wages. So for the strategy that Hardee's is doing, they feel that they can't justify paying their employees a higher wage. Their employees don't produce as much as an employee at Costco. And so depending on the industry, depending on the business, companies are going to engage in different strategies through their wages and compensation packages. And here we have government getting involved in the middle of this. Government wants to make something one size fits all. They want to set a new standard that they all must meet this standard instead of letting businesses do what they want to do. And where is the freedom? And so let's just look at it. When you're working for a wage, what does that mean? It means it's a voluntary contract between the employee and the employer. The employee, maybe they could have got a higher wage, getting a job somewhere else, or maybe a job farther from home, but they valued that job right then, right now. Maybe they were sick of looking for other jobs. They saw this opening, and so they valued getting that job at that wage, and there was no force there. And then the employer, obviously, they hired the person because they feel this person can help me make more money at that wage. But if I have to pay them more than that, maybe I'll lose money. So to them, at that wage, or if they have no experience at all, that wage is sufficient. And maybe if they do get a little more productive, then they will get a raise. They will start making more. And actually, let me give you another example. Back when I was in college in 2010, I was given a speech in front of the class, and I brought up the minimum wage. And actually, before I was going to say that I think the minimum wage should be $0, I told the professor, now, you're not going to like what I'm about to say, but I think the minimum wage should be $0. And after the class got over, I met the professor in the hallway, and she's like, "Justin, how can you say that? How can you be against the minimum wage?" And I had to explain to her, and I had to explain a little more than I did in the classroom because she still didn't get it, and she still doesn't get it. Oh yes, and guess what? By the way, this professor now currently is in the state legislature in Montana. and she resides in the House. And so there we go. She's now a politician. And so I have had to deal with these people myself. They are incompetent. They have no idea what they're doing. They think that they know how to run businesses, but they don't. And I'm just some stupid college kid. And so then there's people like my professor, or like many well-intentioned people out there. They feel that, well, if we don't have a minimum wage, people won't be able to survive. They'll work for $1 an hour. And so we need to have the minimum wage there so we can help these guys have a quote-unquote livable wage. Well, I got news for these people. That's not how it works. Because actually, I would like to ask the question, if their logic is correct, then why aren't all businesses paying the minimum wage? That's why I brought up that example of Costco, where that they're paying above the minimum wage because they value and they want to retain their employees. They want to attract the best candidates. And so, what am I saying here? That there is a market rate for wages. So that's why there doesn't need to be a minimum wage. And let's look at who is making the minimum wage. Well, most of these people are kids still in high school. They're still living with mommy and daddy. It's not like these kids are the sole breadwinners for their families. They're just adding some extra income, and it's their first job. And so this first job, it is crucial to getting that second job, gaining those job skills, waking up early, being there on time, learning how to interact with people. These are all necessary skills that can take you farther in life. And by people wanting to raise the minimum wage, this takes away that opportunity for these kids to get those first jobs. All right, let's now get back to the speech given by Obama and what he says later in the speech, that the minimum wage is worth 20% less than when Reagan was president. And so the question is, why is the minimum wage worth 20% less? It's because of inflation. Our Federal Reserve has a mandated policy of keeping a 2% inflation rate in the economy. And so if your wages aren't rising as fast as the inflation rate, then you're losing money. And that's what they do. That is how these politicians play the game. They make it sound like they're we want to increase minimum wages so people can have a better life. But at the same time, these exact same politicians like President Obama and Republicans on both sides of the aisle, these guys both support our current economic system where they think that inflation is a good thing. And that is a secret way of destroying people's wealth, destroying people's purchasing power. And then in President Obama's speech at the very end there, his little rallying cry, he says that we need to give America a raise. And so when he makes this comment, he's basically saying that government policies can increase prosperity. And I got news for President Obama and anyone else out there who thinks like that. Government can't create prosperity. They can't. They can't mandate it. They can't mandate away gravity. Gravity exists. It's what it is. You can't pretend it doesn't exist. It exists. Well, I guess that's NASA. They ruled Pluto no longer a planet. I always grew up learning that there were 9 planets in our solar system. Well, now there's only 8. So I guess maybe government does have more power than I thought. And so I want to call a proposal. So let's say if the government can create prosperity, then why don't they raise the minimum wage to $100 an hour or $1,000 an hour? Why are they screwing around with this $10 an hour? I mean, what, does President Obama want to keep people poor and destitute? I mean, come on. You might as well go big or go home, right? I mean, if he really believes that government creates prosperity and he wants to completely eliminate poverty in the United States, then I think President Obama should reach deep within himself and he should have a new policy. I would call it the $110 an hour, $100.10, 110. But no, they won't do that. So obviously, I guess what? They support poverty then, right? Oh boy. I mean, this logic, it drives a person mad because there is no logic in what they think. And then I found an article here. It's from Real Clear Markets. It's by this guy named Stan Vuger, if I'm saying his last name correctly. And the title of his article is How the Minimum Wage Destroyed 1.4 Million Jobs. And so I'm just going to start with a quote that he has in the article. He says, large majorities of Americans, including majorities of self-identified Republicans, routinely express their support for raising the federal minimum wage to $8.25, $9, or even all the way to President's preferred $10.10 an hour. And so here we have a perfect example that regardless of what party you're in, the vast majority of people out there support a minimum wage. So this is really not that much of a partisan issue because both sides support it. It's just a question of how much. But then the Democrats, they still paint the Republicans as hating the poor. Or the Democrats, they just hate the poor less, right? And so what I found in this article was he talks about how, in the early 2000s, President Bush was pushing through a new minimum wage. And then in 2009, the minimum wage went from $6.55 an hour to $7.25 an hour. And this took effect on July 24th of 2009, okay? So then later in the article, he talks about this research paper that was done by these two professors, Michael Whiter and Jeffrey Clemens. So what they did is they wanted to look at that increase in the minimum wage, okay? So it went from $6.55 an hour to $7.25. And so they looked at states that already had a minimum wage that was higher than the federally mandated minimum wage. So when that new minimum wage took effect on July 24th, it had absolutely no effect on some states because their minimum wage was already higher. So they called those states the control group because they didn't change. And then they looked at the other group where their minimum wage was forced to go up because of the new federally mandated minimum wage. And they compared the two states. And what they found was that the states that were affected by the increase in the minimum wage, workers in those states found themselves 6% points less likely to have a job. So there was more unemployment when the minimum wage went up. And there is overwhelming evidence against the minimum wage, but yet politicians and most people still support the minimum wage. And then they also found in their study that businesses turn entry-level jobs into internships. So here you have the poor guy, he's making minimum wage, and now they raise the minimum wage, and that job is now lost. This guy went from being paid minimum wage, $6.55 an hour, to now he can be demoted to an intern. And interns don't get paid anything. So this guy is worse off. This guy is poor. This guy now has to work for free. And so later at the end of this article by this Stan guy, he was saying from the minimum wage increase in 2000, the findings by Clemens and Whiter have shown that we have lost 1.4 million jobs because of an increase in the minimum wage. Because they did that by looking at the employment to population ratio of the working age adults. And they saw that there's been a loss of jobs by 1.4 million in that time frame from 2000 until today. And so let me give you another example of why this happens. Let's say you have the minimum wage go to $15 an hour, like these fast food guys. Right now, they're out there. They're picketing and they're calling they want $15 an hour. But let's say, okay, you pass. You have this new minimum wage. Now, let's say that this worker can only produce $10 worth of goods and services per hour. What does that mean? That means by the employer hiring a person at $15 an hour and the employee is producing $10 an hour, the employer, the business, they are losing $5 per hour that they hire that person. So they're losing money. Why would a business hire someone if they would lose money hiring them? They wouldn't. Businesses are there to make money, and that's okay. That's good. And so what happens is that job now disappears. The business can no longer afford to hire that person. Or if they want to keep that person around, then they have to increase prices in their business so that they can keep that job. And so when you have to pay more for the goods and services that you buy, now society as a whole is worse off. Your dollar now doesn't go as far. And so what is the key here? It's you can't pay someone more than they can produce. And so let's actually look at another example of this. I mean, you hear the stories. You've probably heard this argument from your liberal, progressive friends, people in favor of the minimum wage. They talk about the poor hamburger flipper. You know, he's been there for 30 years and he's still working and not making significantly over the minimum wage. I mean, this guy, he's getting old now. He can't move as fast. He's got a family. He's got a bunch of baby mamas out there. I mean, I guess, thinking about it, this actually kind of makes me think this could be an MTV show. The hamburger flipper and all his baby mamas. Okay, so they bring up this argument about this guy. I mean, he does. He's got a bad situation. Here's this guy working all of his life at this hamburger joint, flipping burgers for a living. And he's hardly making above the minimum wage. So they point out, see, businesses are greedy. They don't want to pay a guy more so that he can survive and raise his family and provide for his baby mamas. But here's the question, and I want to destroy this argument. So let me ask you a question. How much skill does it take to be a burger flipper? So if you have someone who has flipped burgers for 30 years, is he 30 times better at flipping burgers than a guy who has flipped burgers for 1 year? The answer is an obvious no. Jobs that require less skill and knowledge get paid less. And jobs that require extensive knowledge and skill gained through experience, those are the jobs that get paid more. I mean, I've seen people who are really good at their job. Like I know this guy, he's an architect, and he's been doing it for over 30 years. He's built many prominent buildings around Billings, Montana, and I've seen him at work. He's putting together these buildings on his AutoCAD program or whatever on the computer. You see all, the models, and you can just see how when this guy's looking at the screen, how he can visualize, and he can be putting all these things together, and he can foresee future problems with the structure of the building and how, no, that's not going to work, and stuff. I'm like, I can't even see it. I have no idea. Or an architect who just graduated from college, he probably couldn't see a lot of these problems. But as you gain more knowledge and you gain experience, you learn from your mistakes, all of these things make an architect more valuable because you become a lot more efficient. You're a lot more productive. You can get more done. You'll make less mistakes. And this is how someone can get a lot more valuable. It takes a lot more skill. And these people who have an expertise on a certain niche, a certain business, there's a limited supply of those guys with that expertise. And so they become very valuable. They're hard to replace. I mean, like the hamburger flipper, that guy, he doesn't show up for work, or he's doing stuff he's not supposed to. He's stealing burger patties. They fire that guy. He can easily be replaced. It probably just takes a week or two of training, and they can have a guy in there who's just as good as the guy they fired. So jobs where you're easily replaceable, look out. Make sure you're not messing up. And so as I've been saying here is, jobs that require extensive job skill and knowledge, those people can vastly increase their productivity as they get better. And the more productive that you are at your job, the more valuable you are to yourself, to your business, your small business, or to your employer. And so the more widgets per hour that you can produce because you're a lot more efficient, you're a lot more productive. If you look at it in terms of society is better off. Society now has more goods and services. They have more abundance. So in the end, prices can come down. And what I've just been talking about just right here is the vast majority of people in the population, they have not even considered this. I mean, the politicians, people in the press, none of these guys think. These non-thinking people are like a bunch of parrots. pass more laws, pass more laws. These guys are trying to cure symptoms to the problems without actually addressing the problem, the root of the problem. Government intervention begets more government intervention. And the new government intervention creates new problems. But then, nope, those new problems are actually created by the free market, so the government needs to step in to fix those problems. And so it's a never-ending cycle. And here, it's no surprise why we have the big government that we do today. And let's look at the minimum wage law. As the politicians have passed it, they said the minimum wage will basically stop people from starving to death, but it has not. We've had the minimum wage since 1938. We still have poverty. And so this government policy has solved nothing. It's only created more problems. And then these politicians who pass these great, wonderful laws that we get to live under, these guys, they're seen as the do-gooders. Even both parties, the Democrats, the Republicans. It's seen as political suicide if any of these guys go against the minimum wage. Because then you're attacked and you're like, oh, so you hate the poor, huh? You like watching people suffer, do you? Most politicians, even Republicans, they go on defense, they put their tail between their legs, and they propose that, okay, maybe we should raise the minimum wage, but let's just raise it $1. We don't want to have too much craziness happening in the economy. Then the Democrats, they want to raise it to $3. And so what we have here, it's a battle over the 40-yard line. Republicans and Democrats, they both want to raise the minimum wage. Where is the third option? The option where like people like me. There should be no minimum wage. Why do we have a minimum wage? And especially look at that stupid number, 1010. That's a marketing gimmick, 1010. Remember the old commercials, 1010-220, the toll-free number you could call? I mean, these guys see all of this as a game. You can make wages some marketing gimmick and just pull numbers out of the air. That's what these politicians do. The Democrats are seen as the ones who support the minimum wage the most. They're the ones who like to call for increasing the minimum wage because they have a huge part of their voting base, the unions. They love when the minimum wage goes up because a lot of union contracts are tied to the minimum wage. So as the minimum wage goes up, so does their union contracts, so does the wages that union members receive. And then also, when the minimum wage goes up, this increases the cost to hire low-wage workers. And so then it makes union labor more attractive. And also, I mean, if you just look at it based on different states throughout the United States, states with a lower standard of living, maybe they can produce goods at a cheaper price because of their low standard of living. But then when the minimum wage is federally mandated to go up, now those states are forced to raise their cost of living. And so now the advantage they might have had trading with other states might be lost because of that. So there's even that goes on. Big businesses like Walmart, they also benefit from the minimum wage because when you have to raise the cost of labor in the mom and pop stores, that makes it so it's harder for them to compete with Walmart. Gee, I thought Democrats and liberals hated big businesses, and I thought they were the ones who cared about the little guy, who cared about these little mom and pop stores. But again, exactly the opposite of what they intended happens. Surprise, surprise. And so this is why I believe understanding economics and how things truly work is so crucial. So many people out there who vote against their own interests, they don't even know it. It's why it's just critical if we can talk to our family and our friends, if we can educate them, the people in our family or friends who they have a strong opinion where they love the minimum wage, and you get into a heated argument, make sure and go on offense. We don't always have to feel the need to have to defend ourselves. Make them defend the undefensible. We have the moral high ground. And so when these people, when you're arguing with them, when they ask you, why do you hate the poor? I want you to ask them, why do you support a high unemployment rate among teenagers? Why do you support destroying mom and pop stores? Why do you support paying higher prices for goods? And so It is time that we finally win the debate and make the minimum wage what it should be. 0. This is Justin Mohr, signing off.